And we just sold.
Mayor, we're ready to start.
Yes, we are ready.
Well, you know what I actually think is really good
Allison
about
and
it?
Gary, we're ready to start.
Are people who don't know that.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The mayor has called the meeting to order.
Good morning.
This is a special council meeting called by Mayor Peña-Lindsay, Vice Mayor Kaplan.
Here.
Councilmember De La Cruz.
Here.
Councilmember Gross.
Here.
Mayor Lindsay.
Here.
Councilmember McCormick.
Here.
Councilmember Moss.
Here.
Councilmember Petros.
Here.
We do have a quorum, Madam Mayor. And the item on the agenda is discussion on step 1 of the Crandon Park Matheson Family Initiative.
Good morning, everyone. We had not planned for public comments, but we do have public, which is absolutely always welcome. So we will, with the indulgence of council, open this discussion item up for public comments. And council members, please turn off your ringers. Thank you.
Not me.
It's me?
It's not me. So, would the mayor turn off her phone?
Yes, please.
Your pocketbook's ringing.
Done. There we go. Done.
All of us turn off our ringers.
Even me?
It's so early in the morning. Okay. So let me, I have a couple of speakers. And we don't have sign-up sheets. I apologize. So I will just call you by order.
I don't know who wants to
Cliff,
be first.
I'm just going to go this way. Okay.
Okay.
And you will be limited to 3 minutes, please. Good morning.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, for giving me a few minutes to.
Still, I need your name and address,
Clifford
please.
Brody, 180 Harbor Drive, Golf. If anybody should know that, it's me.
Thank you.
Thank you for letting me make a few comments about the history of Calusa Park and the stadium, because I think that historical reference is important as you think about what's going to happen now. Back in the early 1990s, Dade County wanted to build a tennis stadium and facility for an annual tennis tournament held for 2 weeks each year, but otherwise available for public use. This was opposed by the Mathesons and much of the Key Biscayne community. Many, if not all of you, have heard the stories of Key residents standing in front of bulldozers so they could not knock down ancient trees on the Crandon Boulevard median. Dade County wanted the village to support the county in their fight with the Mathesons and offered to cooperate with the village for an expanded Calusa Park that would be used for the most part by the village for sports and recreation. That never happened because after much discussion, the village council decided not to make a deal and did in fact oppose the stadium. Therefore, an opportunity to have a village park with excellent athletic fields right in the village was lost. Where we are today, in spite of efforts by every council since, we have never been able to solve this problem. Now it seems something might be back on the table. Back in 1993, the council commissioned a study of Calusa Park by O'Leary Land Planning Associates to see what, if anything, could be done at Calusa. I've provided each of you with a copy of the report. O'Leary studied the area and the governing regulations by Durham Corps of Engineers and others. They also found that in 1998, the county changed the designation of approximately 30 acres from environmentally sensitive park to parks and recreation. Their report concluded something could be done. The O'Leary report shows an expanded Calusa Park with enough room for 8 tennis courts, 2 baseball fields, a soccer field, and adequate parking and restroom concession building. This, of course, is just a suggested configuration. Many different uses could be supported, such as a skate park. Also included is a boardwalk nature trail through the mangroves to an observation platform overlooking Biscayne Bay. Sadly, the only thing left of this plan is the plan itself and a sign on Crandon Boulevard at the circle we pass every time we drive to town, but probably never noticed, that says Crandon Park Calusa Mangrove Trail. You have a picture of the sign. There's no trail. Obtaining this park and building it will require bold action by the council and lots of money to prepare the site and mitigate for disturbed areas. The good news in the report is mitigation could take place on site, which is favorable. Anyway, you have the report. It's about a 10-minute read and gives you a good rundown of the regulatory history. My final thought is at some point the council will have to figure out where the community is on this issue because politics is going to be very important. I'm going to stick around for the meeting if there's any questions.
Thank you, Cliff. We're fortunate to have institutional knowledge. This was actually before the first council after incorporation. Can you please?
Helen White.
Helen White, 241 East Enid Drive. I would like to sort of speak from my heart, so I may be strident at times, so please forgive me. Anyhow, I'm proud to be one of the founders of Incorporation. I am... This one?
But both of them work, Helen.
How's that? Okay. I am, however, disappointed that the village is considering tampering with the Crandon Master Plan, which has protected our front door from further commercialization. I find it odd that the village has spent much time, energy, and money fighting the boat show on Virginia Key, which lasts for a few days, but has no objection to the Miami Open, which lasts almost 2 weeks. Gene Stearns, who was once against the tennis stadium in the early days of incorporation, is now the attorney for the tennis tournament and has lost every lawsuit he has filed for expansion. Now he comes to the village suggesting we pay $20 million to buy some land for playing fields. Crandon is a regional park, not a neighborhood park. Virginia Key is legally more available and useful for Brickell Avenue as well, and could become the place for teenagers to gather. It is unfair to label Bruce Matheson as the no person. The Mathesons have spent much time, money, energy, and money to preserve Crandon for public purposes only. The county is constantly making changes in the park to enhance use. I have 3 resolutions that show exactly what the county has done. It's not stagnant. There's things going on all the time. I have 3 resolutions, one of the mechanized rides at county parks, including Crandon, Miami kite boarding concessions at Crandon Park marine concession. So there are things that are active going on in the park. It's just that every location has its specific use. In other words, if you fit within the master plan, you get approved. The Miami Open has outgrown its location. It can't compete with Indian Wells and others with more resources and less restrictions. It may be best for all of us for them to find a better home, get tennis out of the legal courts and onto the playing courts where it belongs. Leave the Crandon Master Plan alone. It's our only protection from overdevelopment at our doorstep. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Pat Molinari.
Hi, Pat Molinari, 276 Seaview Drive, Key Biscayne. I actually was one of those people in front of the bulldozers in the early 1990s when all this started to happen. There is no way I will ever trust Dade County. After we stopped them from taking down the trees, clearing out everything, they wanted to build an overpass. The overpass was for the hotel that was going to be built on that property, and so the golf carts could come through and go to the beach. We have to protect our front door. Whatever Dade County says, I'm sorry, I never, ever believe, and I always think there's an alternative plan. They took 12 of us down at that time years ago to show us their master plan for that area. And it included hotels, spa, everything. And it included removing the mangroves, which keeps our Biscayne Bay really clean. Please don't do this. And why do you think the Matheson family should be bought off? Is this a bribe that we're trying to give them? This land was donated as parkland. You all are, I'm sure, enraged on what's going on in Brazil and cleaning out the forest. Okay? Are we going to clean out our forest? Are we going to do this? You know, if it was up to Dade County, there would be a hotel there and in no time, and God knows what else. Thank you.
Thank you. Joan, would you like to speak?
No.
Okay, thank you. Well, council members, now for
What about former Mayor Roscoe? No?
and my apologies.
I'm sorry.
No. You sure? Tony? You're all good? Okay. And now for a discussion item. As you all know, we were approached to discuss whether we would be interested in exploring a change to the master plan that would, among other things, allow for playing fields on Crandon Park. And we will be discussing this with the different family, members of the Matheson family and the county. And what we needed in order to do this in a fruitful, thoughtful manner was to know what exactly our options are, what the environment is like, what impacts. We're all very sensitive to making sure that if this is explored, that it's done responsibly. And so the next step to know whether it's even at all possible and what is to have an environmental study of the area to make sure that we are being responsible and thoughtful and we are well informed. So I called this meeting to ask for council authority to give the manager the ability to hire an environmental specialist to review the land to see what the environmental situation is and what impacts would be, if any, and to give a suggestion as to what is doable and what is not, and what is responsible and what is not. So that's why we're here today, and I want you all to think about it, and if we have a motion in a second, we can, after discussion, if needed, take action.
I move that we hire an environmental consultant to study the area that is being discussed for Key Biscayne and Dade County to jointly develop into parkland.
Myra, could you give us
Do I hear a
second.
second?
I'm sorry,
Thank
a
you.
synopsis of what brought us to this point today?
Sure. We were contacted by a member of the Matheson family saying that they would like to revisit the master plan and that they would like to possibly modify it, just tweaks to allow for a more active use, always being parkland is my understanding. That is very, very, that absolutely critical to anything that goes forward is absolutely no development, but more active park uses. And they said that, we had been at the table, that they understood where we stood in terms of the tennis center and some other development, which, we fought the tennis center. But at the end of the day, there was an agreement that was made that was not without us. So just so that you know, we were not party to that, but we do, in fact, now have a tennis center, and that is what we are working with. So in any case, we were contacted. There will be discussions moving forward. There have not been any discussions yet, but to see what is responsible and what is needed, and to see if we want a seat at the table to develop or improve playing fields that are currently there, and possibly expanding within the appropriate footprint, whatever is doable. Additional playing fields for the use of Key Biscayne residents and Miami-Dade residents. So that's where we're at, but we can't take another step without really knowing what is there and what is doable and what is not. We need that information to make good decisions and be able to analyze what's going on.
So the motion on the table is that John bring back a proposal to do the study? Or
No,
John to actually do the study?
To John do the study.
To hire a
And
consultant.
what costs are we looking at to do a study?
Don't know yet. We have to, and part of what I wanted to discuss after the motion is this is a fairly time-sensitive opportunity, and if we have to go through a normal RFP process, it could take us more time than we have just to figure out what consultant we're going to use, and at that point, there may not be anything to consult about. So as an add-on, and we can discuss it at whatever point you think is appropriate, I want to see if we could consider this. It's not an emergency, but it's an extremely time-sensitive situation to bypass the normal RFP process and try to expedite considering who we might use for this. And since it's my motion, if I can speak about it for a second.
Sure.
This has absolutely nothing to do with developing Crandon Park. This has to do with only one thing, and it's taking care of an extreme shortage in our community, which is called playing fields for our kids. We don't have any more land. We don't have any opportunity to put playing fields anywhere. And as a matter of fact, because of the deed restrictions and the way they've been interpreted, the playing fields that do exist now in Crandon Park are being taken away. So we not only have no opportunity for more playing fields, we are having increasingly fewer playing fields for our kids and for the kids in Dade County. We have probably 4 times as many kids in our athletic program today as we had when we bought the Village Green. And everyone knows the situation with the Village Green. It can't possibly sustain the activity that's required to give all of our kids out here an opportunity to play sports. And that's why we've had to go to the move that none of us really liked, as to looking at artificial turf, so we can have those fields active on a more frequent basis. We have no intention of doing anything that would allow any commercial development of the Colusa area or anything else in Crandon Park. What we're trying to do is provide an incredibly important need for our community and for our children. And any deal that we make, any agreement we sign, will be limited strictly to taking whatever land is appropriate in the Colusa Park area and converting it into playing fields. If playing fields aren't a park use, I'm not sure how you define parks, because that's something that you find in almost every park in the country. And so that's our entire intention. The reason we need to hire a consultant is twofold. Number one, the Dade County Parks and Recreation Director is completely against this and is basically calling it an environmental disaster and all these other things to persuade the Dade County Commission that this is a bad idea. Secondly, we're talking about a potential 35-acre piece of land, and we don't really know what's in that land. So we have to hire a consultant for 2 reasons. Number one, to counter the attack from the Dade County Parks and Recreation Director, if in fact he's not correct, but more importantly in my mind, to tell us what we're getting, because we are going to have to pay some money for this, and we have to find out if it's 35 acres, how many of those acres is usable, and how many of those acres is not usable as wetland, and how much it's going to cost after we buy it to develop it into the playing fields we're looking at, and what mitigation costs might be incurred in that process. And we can't go into this blind. So before we even start seriously negotiating this with Dade County, we've got to know what we're looking at in terms of the acquisition costs and the overall costs of converting this into the playing fields for our community. And that's why it's very important and very timely to try to find a consultant as quickly as we can to get us this information. And once we have the information, we may not be looking at 35 acres. We may be looking at 25 acres or 20 acres or 15 acres. We don't know. Obviously, the less we're looking at, the less it's going to cost us. So that's why I was happy to make the motion, hopefully explain to those of you that are very concerned about this what the intention is and what the strict limitations are going to be. And as a final comment, if the restrictions on the playing fields that currently exist in Crandon Park had not been enforced so strictly, and if those playing fields hadn't gone away and are continuing to go away, it's possible we may not be doing this. But we don't have any choice. We've got to take care of our kids.
Thank you, Gary. Mr. De La Cruz?
Yes, I want to echo Gary's words about environmental protection. I think all of us here are on the same page with regards to that. I can't imagine anybody on this council not being concerned about protecting the environment in such a close area as ours or anywhere, really. This is a historic opportunity that may or may not exist, and we need to explore it to its furthest extent. We may not get this again, and it may or may not happen. I think that with sane minds studying it as closely as we intend to, the right thing will happen. One of the things, I just wanted to correct one part of, it's not the deed restriction that keeps us from having playing fields at Crandon. It's the settlement agreement between the litigants, Miami-Dade County and the Matheson family, that agreed to take away the fields that, by the way, had been used for concurrency purposes by the developments here in Key Biscayne. So all of a sudden, where people were pointing, that's where our kids are going to play, was taken away from us. So there's a lot of history behind all this. I know it because I've been working on this particular issue for at least 20 years, since my oldest son was about 5 years old when I got involved with youth sports here. This is a historic opportunity. I can't stress it more. And hopefully we'll have a little bit more discussion after this motion, because I have also some things that I'd like to bring up. But you all have to understand that what we want to do is want to make sure that that area there is never developed for any more than what it is now, and allow us to have some playing fields in that area. There's not much we can do as a responsible body. We cannot not do this. I hope you all understand.
Are we ready to call the question? Yes, Frank.
The studying of the thing is very different from the doing of the thing. I think that it'd be irresponsible not to study the thing. I don't know about doing this thing. There's a lot at issue here that I need to understand, we need to understand.
But without that critical information, we can't.
We have to understand what the opportunity really is for all the reasons that you've said. And there's only one way to do that. There's no database that we can draw on. We're going to have to get out there and have somebody walk the site and survey it and figure out what's growing on it and report back. When it comes time to, if it's possible to negotiate this, I'm not really sure how this came about. I think that this is, the difference between a fortuitous call out of the sky and a solicitation could influence how a debate goes on, or a negotiation goes. We'll see. Helen, I think the things that have happened in the park are less than nothing, but the restrictions in the park seem to me to be outside of the ambit of the restrictions in the master plan. To me, it's a difference between what the plan says and how the plan is interpreted, maybe. But I think that the degree of arbitrariness about some obvious improvements, for example, the Calusa Trail, which is so easy and obvious to do. It's been in our comp plan, it's been in our 2020. We just can't get it done. And it seems regrettable to me that that's the case, because it would be such a nice improvement.
It's in the plan. It's just that the county hasn't done it.
We've tried for years. We've tried to do this. We've offered to pay for it. The extension of the little easement off of Harbor was the first step in that linkage. But we can't get it done for reasons that probably none of us can adequately explain. And we ought to be able to do things like that. When I say we, I mean probably Miami-Dade County, but if we're in collaboration with the county and we can do wise and benevolent beautification things in the park, including, to Gary's point, parks do stand for playing fields, and we do need playing fields. We do have at least one other option, although it's not in the village, and it might or may not be feasible. But there's a possibility that we wouldn't need to do this. There's also a possibility that this would be a better deal and that we would need to do it. But we won't know until we study it.
Correct.
Well, just in response, we should have done this 25 years ago when we had the opportunity. And all of the issues that we're facing now in terms of the limitation of our athletic programs, the lack of park space, the failure to meet concurrency, and all of these other issues, we wouldn't have to talk about this now. We should have done it 25 years ago. We didn't, and I hope we don't make the same mistake twice, because it's not going to come up a third time.
So let's call it.
Madam Clerk, please call the question.
Okay, on the motion to hire an environmental consultant to study the area of Crandall Park to see what environmental impacts would have on us if we get some land there for playing fields.
It's more than that. It's depicting what area would be available for this use.
Okay.
And what environmental conditions, botanical conditions exist, and what mitigation or construction would be required.
Thank you for the clarification, Vice Mayor Kaplan. Do you want a roll call or voice?
Roll call, please.
Councilmember De La Cruz.
Yes.
Councilmember Gross.
Yes.
Mayor Lindsay.
Yes.
Councilmember McCormick.
Yes.
Councilmember Moss.
Yes.
Councilmember Petros.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Kaplan.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Yes, Allison.
So this, I think it's important that we study this. I echo Frank's concerns totally, and I think that this is a first step, maybe an only step, but it's a step that we absolutely, I think, have to take. My concerns about this project as a whole, since I first heard of it, have been the same. While it's an amazing opportunity for Key Biscayne to have access to playing fields that we desperately need, the idea of it being adjacent to our community is amazing. But I certainly share the environmental concerns. I also have concerns with the concept of us, taking over land that belongs to all of the county. I love the idea of Key Biscayne contributing to participate in the betterment of Crandon Park as a whole for the use of all county residents. I think that a key part of this for me would be structuring whatever we do in such a way that we have a say in making sure that commercial development does not happen in the park. It is our front door. It is the crown jewel of the county that we live in. And the idea of making it a better place for everyone, including Key Biscayne residents, is something that I'm certainly all for.
Well, part of the tentative deal that we're looking at right now is to give Key Biscayne a seat at the table. And we have no seat at the table, obviously. We have no voice. We have no anything. So part of this is going to absolutely require that we have a seat at the table and we have a voice as to how not only Colusa, but the entire Crandon Park area is used or not used. And as far as taking control of it, Allison, we can't take control of it. All we can do is help in whatever way we can financially and maybe administratively to convert it into something usable as playing fields. It'll be available for all of Dade County. We're not going to own it.
Well, and I think it's important that we make sure that, discussion of us exploring this and hiring an environmental consultant is going to be out there. And I think it's really important that we control the message that we are not trying to buy it, that we are not Key Biscayne saying we want this and we're just going to go and take it, that we are doing something for all the residents in the county.
Correct.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And I think that should be, if any of us are asked questions, that we have to make sure that that's the message that gets out, because I'm not so sure that that's where we initially went.
That was not the statement or the implication from the statement. But put yourself out 3 years from now. If there are fields out there, one thing that's going to happen is that we'll have to have scheduled priority use so we can use it, or else why would we do it? So there will be some push-pull on county versus Key. It just will be that way. It has to be.
Yep.
It doesn't need to be controversial.
Katie.
The other part that I think is an important consideration, if this is something that's being developed for the entire county, is some form of a traffic study to understand the implication yearly. I think many of us feel the brunt of increased population, not only on the island, but within the county, and making sure we've
taken great strides to try to reduce traffic on Virginia Key, but this could have a real impact on our thoroughfare through Crandon Park itself. So I don't know if that would be part of this, the feasibility, because it's more of an environmental thing, but I think that would come after that.
That needs to be studied as part of the analysis. Yes.
Actually, we work very closely with the county using the fields that are there now. So that's not something new with regards to, it's just that, you know, obviously there's going to be a little bit larger area maybe if this works out. And we'll have to work very closely with them to make sure that it's open to all of the residents of Miami-Dade County. That's absolutely essential that everybody understand that that's what, you know, just because we're helping with the development of it doesn't mean that there are fields. There are still the county fields. We have to have, you know, the right to schedule our sporting leagues and such there. At the end of the day, the Village of Key Biscayne residents are the ones that use the county facilities there during the past year and for the last 20 years. So we can continue that relationship, and I don't think we'll have any problem with that.
But I do think the use of brand new playing fields may be very different than the use of the fields that currently exist.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just a countywide need. There's a shortage of playing fields, and especially with the urban core developing and into families moving in. We currently have, I think, over 100 City of Miami kids making the drive every day to participate in our sports. And my understanding is we've turned away over 200 just because we do not have the space. So there is a real need for all of this. With that said, I think we can adjourn this meeting. Do I have a motion?
One suggestion on this study. We'd always talked about, not just during the tennis tournament being in session, but the ability to get from Key Biscayne north into Crandon without having to go out on the causeway. And we thought there was room there, and whoever was studying it during times we were talking about either being able to walk or take golf carts or ride your bike down there if you were interested in going to either a tennis center or even going to the golf course, that there'd be room to do that. So I think that this study ought to include that possibility, where that kind of easement or paveway would lie and what it would take to build it. Does that sound right?
I need to be correct here. So along with the environmental study, you're looking for what was promised to us by IMG when they were soliciting our vote for that referendum.
Right.
And that's the document that you would like to add to that also, or just to see if environmentally? You want a plan for that, or just an environmental study?
I think I'd like to see whether there's room to do it, and if there is, where it would go approximately, and what kind of mitigation would be involved in building it.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we also need to think about going forward in the short term and in the longer term. We need to establish a negotiating team, you know, a discussion team, a team that's going to talk with the county authorities, with the Matheson family, with whoever it is that's interested. I'm sure we'll have a lot of other people come up. And I think that it has to be a concerted effort. It's got to be a team that's going to have a significant amount of restraint. I don't believe that we need to go out there and give personal opinions about a lot of things other than we're studying and we're doing different things. But I do think that we should do that as soon as possible, maybe even today. I believe that that team obviously has to include our manager. I think it should include one of our council members. I would propose that I mean, I've been involved in this issue for us ever since like I said, my son was 5 years old. So, and I have an engineering background. I'd like to be involved in that team. I think it's the issue that's been most important to me ever since before and after I got elected to the council. So I'd throw that out there. But I do believe, and I think that also we have some people from the community who are ready, willing, and able to help us. I'm not sure that we need to discuss that right now, but is a situation that we should probably consider doing today, because we have to be ready to be able to sit down with them and continue our discussions, which are, this is either going to happen pretty quickly or not at all, and that's why we need to get our study done, and we need to be able to negotiate whatever positions are offered to us. And so I would propose that.
Listen, that's, and under the charter, I am the intergovernmental liaison, and I will be working on this, but let's quickly and at our next meeting discuss how we should proceed in addition to what's going on.
Well, what I'm proposing is that it not be that way, that we...
Well, under the charter, that's how it is.
No, that's not necessarily the way it has to be. The mayor has a position on the charter, which I think we all very aware of. We've read the charter many times before and after we all got elected, and that's not necessarily what the charter says. Just like in the city of Miami negotiations, Frank has been very instrumental and has gotten us to a point that we're discussing certain very important things. I believe that in this particular case, we need the same treatment. And if I have this proposed motion, then that's what I'll do at this particular moment. That we establish a negotiating group that includes the manager and one other council member, and that we go that way. So,
Mr. Attorney, would this motion be part of this discussion that is on the agenda?
Fine to include it as part of the agenda. I mean, I know it was noticed for this step, but I think it's relevant to the topic.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Brett.
I just wanted to have John, I mean, can you assure us that we're going to get a reasonable price to do the study? That's the only thing that would concern me a little bit, because we don't have that in front of us.
I'm capped. For a study like this, there's a cap. I'm not going to go into that at this one. We can talk about it. So every invoice and every proposal that's going to come in is going to be it. But by statute, I'm capped.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it will be,
Within that cap, under the cap.
well, depending on how much further this grows.
Bert.
I have one comment on this negotiation team concept. I think that we shouldn't squabble up here over which of us should be on that team. I think a more important issue is who's going to be the lead. And I think that Gene Stearns has brought us to this point, and I think that he certainly should be continuing to be involved in this process to take the lead with the people he's already been talking to. I know that Gene has no intention of getting compensated for it. He's doing it for the same reason he's always done everything he's done for the village. And I would hate to see him not continue to be in a lead position. Whoever up here assists in that, along with the manager, certainly. It may not be the same person for every part of this. And I think that, to have a limitation on one person being the council liaison might be a mistake. I think that there are several elements that go along with this, and we may have different people with different areas of expertise that can help John and Gene in this negotiation effort. So I think we need to retain some flexibility in that regard.
Yes.
Okay. I spoke to Gene at length yesterday. He very much wants to be in that position. And as a matter of fact, he left it up to us whether that I could propose that he can be either have an attorney-client privilege or just as a regular member. I happen to think that probably an attorney-client privilege, and he said he would charge $1 for his participation. I think that would be something that we would definitely consider, and we might want to think about that today also. I think we need to put this situation into something of a working matter, because a lot of things are going to happen very soon, and we need to come out of this with someone to be able to work with our manager, and if we agree with Gene Stearns, in order to speak for the village at some point.
Katie.
I'm a little bit uncomfortable with the thought of establishing a negotiating team, given that this meeting was about determining whether or not it was feasible,
Yep.
and that we are looking to do a study, and I feel like we need to know that before we move forward on how we're going to try to negotiate, because we don't know if there's anything to negotiate. So I personally would prefer to hold off on that thought process. I think we can move quickly once we know that, but it seems like those two things should not be happening in parallel right now.
Agreed.
Soft counterpoint, and I don't know what's going to happen, but whether we do something formal about a delegation or not, it seems probable to me that there are going to be discussions, and
Absolutely.
we're not going to be a part of them unless we choose to be. Much of this is going to involve a private family. It's not going to involve Miami-Dade County. Some of it will, obviously. It's usually not the best idea to have multiple voices weighing in from different perspectives at different times without being coordinated. It's good to have multiple people, but there needs to be coordination. So just observations. And I think the main point that I reacted to is that people are going to be talking about this without us.
So do you have a solution?
I think that it's not necessary to defer all communications until there's a clarity on the study. But at the same time, we're not going to be able to make commitments or promises because we're not going to know. So it's all rather theoretical. But what happens in the short term will either make more likely that there'll be a positive possibility of negotiating something or less likely.
But that's exactly why we have to move forward with this study, because we don't know what we're negotiating until we understand what's involved in converting this tract of land into what we want it to be. So I agree with you totally. That has to happen quickly, and that's why I hope we can bypass this RFP process and get it done and move this along.
I agree 100%, but I really do believe that we need to have a person from the council in this team ready to go. We can't not do that. That would be a mistake, not to have somebody from the council with the manager and hopefully with Gene Stearns and whoever else we think is necessary.
I have to tell you, I think we're represented by council. As much as Gene Stearns may be a good asset, and I know he's a willing participant and he's a resident and has very good intentions, we are represented by council, and we need to go through our council as well, and I think we should not bypass that process. We all are not always aligned with what the priorities are, and I feel very uncomfortable deferring that or giving that authority to someone else, or even having the optics of that being out there. I think we were the elected people to represent this community. We have council that sees things from a municipal lens, and we have to be very careful. We're the electeds. Having said that, under the charter, I am the point person for now. Once we get to the information that we need to make an assessment, then we will, I would propose we discuss a strategy and appoint the appropriate people for the different components of what needs to be done. Yes,
I couldn't agree more with we're the elected people and need to have one of us out there. I think that's exactly what Lucho was saying and saying that he would like to be that person. And because he's been involved with this process, it's his sort of baby, if you will. This is what he wants to devote his time to. And I think that he's asking us, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he's asking us to make that decision, to say, between now and our next meeting, there are going to be conversations had. He would like to be there, not to talk numbers, not to negotiate, to be the eyes, to be the ears, to see, to be the elected official who is in the room with conversations. Am I right about that, Lucho?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm asking for. And if it has to be a motion, then
Right.
maybe you want to make it, or I'll make it, or whoever.
I just point out that under the charter, that is the role of the mayor.
I understand, but as I've seen, and again, I am clearly new at this, we have had other times where it's been someone else when it was appropriate. Is it something that we cannot do?
We can do that.
Chad?
Yeah, I mean, clearly, the charter does say that the mayor is the official designated to have dealings with other government entities, but this council has always delegated that position to the extent that they felt a particular council member had unique experience. And, we've done it for years. And I think Frank's been doing it with the library site and then with the parking lot, and there's been other examples over the years where that's occurred. So I think if it's the will of the council, it's up for discussion.
Particularly where Mike Davey at the Beach Club, it's not a government, it's a possible deal. They're parallels. I come back to what I was thinking in response to your practical observation. This is going to be proceeding, probably, and we probably ought to have somebody listening in.
So I guess we need to make a motion. You want to say something?
I'll move, to appoint Luis to be, I guess, to work with Jean and to work with Myra, because Myra's going to be involved. She has to be. To work with all of us, because we're all going to be involved. But it's good to have a point person.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Can I add one more thing? Back on the costs of doing the study, since this is open, I think it would be, responsible if we can get, I don't think it will slow down the time in any way to get at least 3 estimates at the same time, and then you choose which one is the best one.
And if the cost becomes complicated by the easement, we'll defer the easement and, the path of travel, we'll defer that. We'll do that later.
I would suggest we not include that, because this is a
Yeah.
very specific.
Yeah.
Let's be where we're at.
specific.
That
let's
discussion and
focus.
action discussion took place after we voted 7-0 to move forward with an environmental study. If we're stepping back, I don't know that that's in my realm at this point. I know what my marching orders are and how quickly I want to get started on this.
I think we should focus on the environmental study for this specific purpose, see where that leads, and I totally agree with Brett. This isn't, it's not a formal RFP process, but certainly getting 2 or 3 bids from qualified people would be, I think, the right way to do it, and then you decide based on your cap.
If you engage the kind of consultant that we're thinking that you're going to engage, and you tell him that in addition to this core project that's a possibility, and we want to determine where it would go and what it would take to realize on it, that we have spec'd out a path of travel, and while he's doing his environmental assessment, if he could look over there in addition to over here, it seems to me that that's a doable thing, and if he can't do it, or if it adds cost or complication, then he won't do it.
I think we should limit it to the environmental.
We can always follow it up after that with that other piece, but let's not muddy the waters.
Yep.
Let's focus on this.
So be it.
Okay. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Moved.
Second.
Meeting adjourned.